take this couch to the church. You know, if it's gotten to the place to where it's no longer usable and serviceable in your home, why would you bring it to the temple of God? So here were three guys that went to worship Christ, and in their mind, they were going to take to him the best. You know, and a lot of times preachers don't preach about this because sometimes people get the wrong idea. But if you look in the Bible, Christ is always talking about, or the Word of God is always talking about, God is a jealous God. And on that same note, he very much does not like junk. He just doesn't like junk. When they built the temple, what you realize is not the materials that they built the temple out of was the best of the materials that were available at that particular time. The very best that they had at that particular time. So, in other words, I think what God is trying to get us is not so much that he's wrapped up in a building or anything. What he's trying to get us to understand is that when we come to him, we should come to him in a mindset of our best. When we present to him, we should present to him our best. But it can cause interference. How can materialism interfere with worship? How can materialism interfere with worship?
Well, your clothes, furniture, that's material. You don't worship that. You don't, because that's material, but your life ain't.
Eva, Sister Marie?
Well, I thought what you see is, you'll see a person transition, they'll come to church and when they start out, they didn't have a car. Or when they started out, they didn't have a wardrobe. And, they served God when they didn't have that stuff. And as soon as he opens up a door for them and then they have nice clothes and then they have a little piece of a car, then they can't come to church anymore. And a lot of times that stuff gets in the way. We got, I guess from their standpoint, they got exactly what they needed, so they don't need God anymore until they need him.
Kind of like the genie in the bottle.
Hey, get up here and sit down.
And then, this is kind of off the subject, but you got to realize they've done it like a year and a half of their life just to get to Christ because they wanted to, see him and they wanted to, meet him that bad. They didn't have cars back then. We have cars now. Some people have a church right down the street, but they won't go to him. But they travel that far to get to him.
They traveled that far, and that, that is a very important point. But the sad part is that you don't even have to travel.
Now,
he tells us to assemble ourselves among fellow believers, but the reason he wants us to assemble ourselves is not because Christ just lives on the altar up there. That's not why he wants us to assemble ourselves. When we assemble ourselves hopefully for the purpose of encouraging one another and joining one another. And notice, once again, God's kind of big on the group thing. Notice he doesn't say where a believer is and I am, there shall I be also. What does he say?
well, 1 and 2.
Well, there are, no, he didn't say one.
He said 2 or more. 1 and 2?
He said, well, there are 2 or 3 gathered in my name, say, there too shall I be also. And that here Christ was God in the flesh. He didn't need the disciples. No. You understand what I'm saying? He could have done what he needed to do by himself, and he just didn't get 2 or 3.
Back to the materialism part, when you start focusing on materialistic things, you start seeing everything through that kind of lens. It takes your focus away from your emotional well-being, your relationships, as well as your spiritual well-being, and you get wrapped up and tied up in the materialistic part of it, and the pursuit of things instead of the pursuit of relationships. relationship and that kind of thing.
It becomes very difficult to worship. You're exactly right. It does. It becomes very difficult to worship because typically when a person gets caught up in materialism, after a while their focus is no longer worship. Their focus is upon obtaining material. You know, where it is, next thing you know, they're saying, well, oh, I need a second job. Oh, and I need a third job. Not because maybe they can't pay their bill, but that second job would afford them the ability to be able to get the 60-inch. You understand what I'm saying? They have a 30-inch, but they would like to get a 60-inch, so they go and get another job. They'd like for their kids to be able to wear all of the name brand items, so they get another job. And then in the course of that, they get so caught up and so tired that they're no longer able to serve God and no longer able to worship.